Hi, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Liz Pena, a marketing specialist at Verity IT. Today's webinar will be covering ransomware and 2021 threat predictions. Ransomware is a topic that doesn't seem to be losing any momentum. Every single day, businesses across all industries are paying ransom to get access to their data from cybercriminals. In the past year, 92% of organizations report that their organization has seen ransomware delivered via email, resulting in nearly 30% of those organizations being impacted by it. Today, we are joined by John Clay, Director of Global Threat Communications at Trend Micro, to discuss the impact of ransomware further. Thanks for joining us, John.
Yeah, thank you very much, and welcome everybody. Appreciate you having me today. Just a quick background, I've been in cybersecurity. I'm going on my 25th year in cybersecurity, working for Trend Micro all those years. Currently, I work with our threat research teams to help them understand and promote the research that they provide. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. Each year, we go to our community of researchers and ask them what our customers are likely to see in the following year. And so we published the full report was published back in December. You can access it on our website. And I wanted to kind of highlight a few of those. I'm not going to go through all of the predictions. Every year it seems to change. Some years we have 20 predictions. Some years, like this year, I think we had 7 predictions. But they cover a wide range of topics, but these are the ones that I think are most important to you as business folks and people that have to deal with the threats that are targeting the enterprise network today. So let's get started. We're gonna take some questions at the end, but I do, and you can put those into the Q&A button. But I do want to talk a little bit about the different areas that we are going to cover. So the first one is first prediction is threat actors will turn home offices into their new criminal hubs. So one of the things that we have been seeing, obviously with the global pandemic, there is a lot of people now working out of their homes. All of you are probably working at your home, out of your home offices today. And the criminals recognize this. They actually have been targeting the home routers for quite some time. If you look at we actually published a research report called Botnet Wars, where the botnet herders are going after people's home routers. And in fact, even when they compromise a home router, they will kick off any other malicious actors who may have compromised that router earlier. So they're kind of targeting that. The main reason they're targeting home routers is they are the access point to inside and outside and coming in and out of the home network. It also gives them visibility of what is available to them in the home network. And one of the things that we're going to see this year more often than we've seen in the past is the introduction of a worm into these home networks, because a worm is capable of spreading very quickly. And the intent here is to, as quickly as possible, spread across the home network and infect as many systems as possible. A lot of the botnet guys folks are going after the devices inside home, not just the PC and the mobile devices, but they're going after IP cameras, they're going after DVRs, they're going after a lot of these devices in order to actually perpetrate crime outside and sending it out. But what we're going to see more likely now is in the underground is something we're calling access as a service, which is essentially when a criminal gang or a criminal gets access to a home network, and then they will sell that access to other malicious actors. And in this case, what they're going to be doing is going after key employees of the business. So if you think about who's accessing data on from your company or from your customers, they're going to target HR, they're going to target finance, they're going to target sales reps, all the people that have access to the data. They're also going to be looking for those people that are utilizing that data on the local machine. So if your business has not invested in a cloud application, excuse me, where the data is all managed and maintained and stored in the cloud, but you're still working on local spreadsheets, you're still working on local documents. Those are the individuals that they're going to target, because they can, again, they can then take that, steal that data fairly easily, compared to trying to compromise the cloud in that case. So certainly, home offices will continue to be targeted as we continue through the pandemic. Good news, obviously, on that front, we're starting to see more of the vaccines taking effect. Hopefully, we all get back to where we can actually go into an office or go visit offices and people in the future. But in the meantime, we definitely will see these actors going after the home network, as well as using that as a pivot point or a way to laterally move into the corporate network. Some things to think about as you're looking through security. First and foremost, obviously, you don't control that home office network, but you can help your employees understand how to secure their routers. We have a lot of information and infographics and stuff that you could send to your employees on how they can secure their router more effectively. Um, I would also recommend that you educate them about how they could be targeted, phishing attacks, et cetera. That can help out as well. Also, request that they are utilizing some form of security on their devices inside their homes. You can even recommend a security router that sits in line with the home router, and it can analyze the traffic going into and out of, and it can do some blocking and some detecting and things like that, is also an idea for you as well. The next one is extortion attacks, including ransomware, will continue to plague organizations of all sizes. So I'm going to take a little bit more time on this because we are talking about ransomware. Ransomware obviously has been a bane to a lot of businesses out there. We just published our 2020 year-end report yesterday. And in that report, there's a lot of details about the ransomware attacks that we have seen over the course of 2020. We're going to continue to see ransomware being used by the threat actors in 2021. But the few things that we have seen recently in terms of changing their tactics, one of the good news is that the security industry came out with some technologies like AI and machine learning that have been very effective in detecting the new ransomware variants and ransomware families that have been developed by the malicious actor community out there. And so they had to change their tactics in terms of how to get ransomware on these systems. So a couple of things that they've done. First and foremost, they're doing much more targeted approach. They don't do the spray and pray model that they used to. So they are actually going and doing some investigation on who they want to target. If you look at our data by industry, government was number one industry targeted. Healthcare was up there. Manufacturing was up there. Finance was, retail was up there as well. And so they're going to look for those kinds of businesses that they can target. They also are now, instead of dropping ransomware as the first and foremost attack vector, they're actually now getting into the organization through typical means like phishing an employee or doing a vulnerability, exploiting a vulnerability. But then they're laterally moving, and where they're laterally moving is to the business critical systems. So they will identify those systems that run your day-to-day operations. They may run some of the key manufacturing lines. They may look at running some of the key data or applications that you're using as a business to manage and run your business. They will then target those. But they also, and so that's that lateral, that east-west traffic versus the north-south, which is outside the internet into your organization. So the east-west is happening on a regular basis. We're also seeing the attacks as a service or access as a service model used here predominantly, where one group is going to be used to actually access the network. Then they'll sell access to another group that does other parts of the attack. And finally, they will uh, sell it to a ransomware actor who will deploy ransomware. Now, another tactic that they've done that has been very effective for them is something we call pay or publish, which is prior to the ransomware malware being deployed that encrypts all of the data and makes it inaccessible. They will steal data first and foremost. So they'll steal your critical data, they'll steal your customer data, they'll steal whatever they can get access to, and they'll exfiltrate that so that if you're an organization who has very good backup capabilities, if you do get hit with the ransomware, you can rebuild and get your systems back online very quickly, which means you probably aren't going to pay the ransom. They will come back to you and say, well, by the way, we stole all of your data. We're going to put that on the internet, or we're going to sell it to others to do stuff unless you pay us. And so it's that double extortion tactic that they're using as well. Ransoms continued to rise in first quarter and second quarter last year. We were upwards of 100 plus thousand per ransom. And again, that goes to who they are targeting. They're targeting businesses that can't stay offline for very long, and they're more likely to maybe not have as good of ability to rebuild and get their systems back online quickly. And so they are able to increase those ransoms pretty dramatically then. And companies, unfortunately, are paying those ransoms to get those systems back online. One of the things that we are seeing as part of this process is we are seeing a lot of early warning malware being deployed. And what that means is, as an organization, if you see emotet detection or a trick bot detection, don't just discard it because maybe it got detected and it got removed. The likelihood that that is the beginning stages of an actual ransomware attack are pretty high now. If you see Cobalt Strike or Mimikatz being used inside your organization, you may use those on a legitimate basis, but you may need to check to see, is that in an area or is that being done in a legitimate way? And if not, then that's another sign that there's probably ransomware going to be deployed at some point. The problem that a lot of organizations are going to have is if they do detect ransomware at some point in time, the likelihood that these actors have been in your network for quite a long time doing other activities is very, very high. So ransomware is actually an indication that you've been compromised for quite a while now by these actors. So it is going to continue to be a problem. Some things that you want to think about there, obviously, is backup is going to be a very effective capability. If you can rebuild your systems very quickly, you can not pay those ransoms. But you need to detect this stuff early as possible. So looking at making sure you take a good look at these infections that happen prior to, and there's been some publications out there of all these different ransomware families and what the precursor to that ransomware will be. So I recommend you doing some investigation there. But also you can, the layered defense model obviously is very good. Phishing an employee is still going to be used regularly in these attacks. So educating your employees on how to identify phishing, that they're being phished, et cetera, those kind of things can help out. And then if you do have endpoint stuff, I would recommend making sure you enable the AI and machine learning capabilities there. All right, the next one we want to talk about is attackers will quickly weaponize newly disclosed vulnerabilities, leaving users with a narrow window for patching. So this prediction comes from our 0-day initiative, which is Trend Micro's bug bounty program that's been around. This has been a 0-day initiative has been around since 2005. And they basically have about 10,000 researchers out there in the world that submit bugs to them. Then we manage the bug process, patching process with the vendor affected for that researcher. So we pay them a ransom and then we do that. But what we have found in working with this organization is that a lot of these end day, we call them end day vulnerabilities, are a gold mine to these criminals. And what an end day vulnerability is a vulnerability that actually has been patched already. So if you look at most of the exploits that are being utilized today, and even in the exploit kits that are being used by criminal gangs out there, the majority of the exploits are already patched vulnerabilities. So it could be been patched for a couple of days, could be patched a couple of weeks. WannaCry, for example, there was a patch available 30 days prior to the attacks happening. So organizations had a 30-day window to patch their systems. Well, obviously, WannaCry still caused lots of havoc out there, and it was a problem. But that window of opportunity we see are shrinking very much so. Part of reason why we're seeing that is that we're seeing marketplaces popping up in the underground where they're actually selling these exploits very quickly after a vulnerability is found. So when these threat actors have started to build a business around the fact that they see a vulnerability being published, there might be a proof of concept code already published as well with that. They take that proof of concept code and they reverse engineer and make sure, and then they utilize it as a into an exploit, and they sell that exploit to other criminals in the underground. We're even starting to see customized exploits. So, meaning that there are marketplaces that are being built up just for Microsoft and even for just Microsoft Teams or Microsoft Exchange or Zoom or whatever. So we're going to see more and more of these vulnerabilities that get disclosed being exploited much faster, which means you as a business are going to have to deal with patching faster and faster and faster, which is a challenge for a lot of organizations. We know that patch management is a challenge. You need to think about, which patches, which vulnerabilities you should patch quickly versus ones you can take it, may be able to take a little bit more time. And when you think about that, you want to look at each vulnerability in and of itself. First and foremost, does that vulnerability have a proof of concept available in the public realm? If it does, then that's probably a little more critical that you patch that quicker. If you see it starting to be exploited in the wild, that is a big red flag that you need to get that patched as quickly as possible. Some things you can do here, obviously, first and foremost, is understanding what applications and operating systems you use as a business, and because those are the only ones you need to patch. You don't have to worry about any other vulnerabilities that come out for some application that you don't utilize. But also you can think about maybe an IPS technology, intrusion prevention, intrusion detection, both at the network layer as well as the host-based layer. Those will actually virtually patch the vulnerability, then allows you to actually then take your time to test the patch, make sure it works in your environment, doesn't cause any issues, and then you can roll out the patch at your leisure because you have a virtual patch in place that can detect and block any exploits of that vulnerability. So those technologies you might want to take advantage of as well, because in a lot of cases those virtual patches can be uh, uh, deployed even before a patch is available. So any of the vulnerabilities that we receive, the bugs we receive in our 0-day initiative program, will have a virtual patch available to our customers. Last year, we averaged, I think, around 80 days prior to the patch being deployed by the vendor. So a couple of things you can do there. The next prediction is exposed APIs will be the next favorite attack vector for enterprise breaches. If any of you are building a cloud architecture or cloud infrastructure, you probably are starting to deal with a lot of the APIs. APIs are very well utilized in a cloud environment. And the reason for that is those APIs really are kind of the glue that put a lot of these applications, a lot of these vendors, third-party applications together. And so the challenge that we have seen, our researchers have been investigating APIs for quite a while now. And one thing they're finding is one, they're very easy to find on the internet. So organizations, unfortunately, may be misconfiguring their APIs or the IPs that they're associated with to be open to the internet. That gives the criminals access to that API. Also, APIs aren't inherently built with security in mind today. A lot of organizations that are building APIs for their customers are getting those out as fast as possible because they're in demand. And so they may not put as much security around those APIs as they need to. And so it's very difficult. And now we don't expect this to be widespread usage, but where we are going to see APIs is for those criminals that find out when they attack an organization that they find it difficult to compromise because the organization's doing a lot of the things that they should be doing to block these attacks. Well, if because APIs are new, they're not as secure as they need to be. These criminals then will pivot to attack the API in the cloud infrastructure. Also, the cloud infrastructures are becoming more and more of a target for criminal actors. And again, because of the widespread use of APIs, we will see that this tactic being used more and more in the future, especially this year and next year, as people do go about building clouds. So a couple of recommendations here. I would recommend you talk to your cloud security vendor. A number of cloud security vendors, including ourselves, have some technology that can help in this area. If you are a business that is building and developing APIs, we just recommend that you start thinking about in making sure your developers understand that they need to address security from the beginning. And so the entire development lifecycle should include a security component across that entire lifecycle for that API, so that you can secure your customers better off than you have maybe in the past. Um, Another one, enterprise software and cloud applications will be hounded by critical class bugs. So one of the things that we did see from 2019 to 2020 with our zero-day initiative is a lot more critical and high severity bugs were submitted to us for these business class applications than ever before. So the researchers are identifying that businesses are using these critical class enterprise applications, cloud applications, um, much more and more, especially the collaboration ones, Office 365, Teams, SharePoint. These are being used more and more, especially as we've moved to a remote model of computing for a lot of businesses. And so the malicious actors recognize that and they're taking advantage of it. Office 365 is very highly targeted by criminals today, looking for credentials, looking for ways to compromise the accounts there and utilize those. Um, a lot of sensitive data is now being stored in the cloud as well. We published a report called the Cloud of Logs, as a lot of organizations are shifting their model to storing data in the cloud, whether it's an S3 bucket or other kinds of cloud storage devices. Um, those are starting to be compromised as well. Our researchers did a search on the internet and found many of these logs and data repositories open to the internet, open with very little security built into them. So if you're an organization that is starting to utilize these, understand that misconfigurations are the number one reason for organizations being compromised through their cloud infrastructure. So you want to maybe look at ways that you can minimize misconfigurations of your cloud applications, your cloud architecture. One other prediction we make around the cloud today is that zero data breaches are going to be due to the cloud provider's fault. So AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud, they're doing their part to ensure that their component of the shared responsibility model is secure. And we think that that's going to maintain itself in 2021. Where the breaches are going to occur is, again, the user's side of the house, that something in most cases, again, in nearly all cases, it's a misconfiguration that causes something to be opened up to the internet, which then gives access to these criminals to access and compromise it and do stuff with it. So that's certainly going to occur. So again, talk to your cloud provider, your security provider, figuring out how you can secure your cloud infrastructure much more effectively. If you look at these applications that you're using, ensuring that they, any bugs that are found are patched as quickly as possible, et cetera, et cetera. And then the last one I have is nation state tactics will be widely adopted by cyber criminals. So everyone probably has been following the SolarWinds attack, compromise and breach. And the criminals also see that that was a very successful attack. They were able to maintain persistence inside their victims' networks for a very long time, months and months and months, until they were discovered. And a lot of those networks, they may still be inside, laying dormant, waiting for opportunity to take advantage again. But the cyber criminals out there recognize that these tactics work very well, and so they will start adopting it. One of the first ones that we're already seeing them being adopted is the extensive intelligence gathering that they do even before an attack. So they will investigate who their victim is going to be, um, what they want to do with what's their motivation for the attack, um, where do they want to attack the organization, why do they want to attack them, who they want to attack inside the organization, and even when do they want to attack it, because they're finding that different times of the day they're much more successful in their attacks. They're tracking their campaigns, figuring out what is working, what isn't working. So even before they launch the attack, they'll have all of this information and they'll figure out, and deploy it, and then deploy the attack and deal with it. The collaboration between groups inside the underground is as good as it's ever been. You even are seeing a supply chain inside the underground community, where one group is managing the actual initial infection, another group manages a different part of the attack, another group manages the other part of the attack, kind of like we talked about with the ransomware gangs. The ransomware gangs are adopting this for sure, this model. Anti-forensics is being used extensively. If you read the Microsoft report about all the anti-forensic and obfuscation tactics that they used against them, the SolarWinds people used against them, you'll see it was pretty extensive, pretty sophisticated. These actors understand that. The cyber criminals are starting to adopt this as well. A lot of their malware is being built into with obfuscation tactics and techniques built in. The attacks also are going to go across your entire network. Just understand that now these attack campaigns, they aren't going to start and end at your endpoint. They're going to laterally move. They're going to move to your data centers. They're going to move to your cloud infrastructures. They're going to come across the messaging layer, the network layer, the web layer. All of those are going to be used as part of these campaigns. So you as an organization need to think about, how can I get better visibility across my entire network stack in order to identify these attacks. And like I mentioned before, if you see an emotet and detection, that's probably a precursor to another attack. So if you detect ransomware at some point, you probably need to go backwards in time and figure out what are all the other things that they probably deployed and utilized inside the network. The other thing we're going to see is what we call island hopping. If you're not familiar with that term, that's a term used for, it's kind of like the same thing as a supply chain. So they're not going to go after the main victim. They're going to go after the supply chain or another organization who has access to that main victim's network. So they're going to use that tactic as well. As we see, the supply chain is one we're very concerned about, because these actors realize that there are applications that are used by many different organizations out there, and they may be being developed by might be a small business that is building this application and managing the application. Well, the likelihood that they can go in and compromise that and use a component of that supply chain, like an update They can compromise the update like they did with the SolarWinds product. That is something that they can do as well. So that's going to be a challenge. So to finish this off, I wanted to highlight a few things that that you can do as an organization. This information actually comes from the Verizon data breach report back in 2019. If you don't read that report, they publish it every year. I recommend it. It gives you a lot of insights into how breaches are occurring around the world. But there was a section in the back that was done by the United States Secret Service, and what the United States Secret Service had done is interview a number of these actors that they had arrested and asked them, how were you able to get into an organization, and more importantly, how were you able to actually maintain persistence inside that organization's network for so long? There was one actor that was inside an organization's network for 10 years, just doing little things. And there was three things that they highlighted that they looked for inside an organization. First thing was human error. If they could exploit human error, and again, that could be an employee clicking on a link, opening up a phishing email that they shouldn't. It could also be an administrator misconfiguring their cloud infrastructure. So they looked for that human error. They also looked for IT security complacency. I didn't patch that that vulnerability that was patched 2 months ago, and I used that. Or or I didn't turn on certain features of my security product that I should have turned on, that could have detected this ransomware and easily. The last one is technical deficiencies. So do I have any technical deficiencies that I have set up? Misconfigurations or things that happen with that. But the one thing that they highlighted more importantly is that it's when multiple TTPs are utilized in concert that these actors were able to gain and maintain access to the computer network. So they would look for two or all three of these things, and if they found a network that had two or three, they knew they were able to pawn that network very easily. So that's something to think about when you're thinking about your security. Think about, how can I minimize human error? How can I minimize IT security complacency? Look at your technical deficiencies, identify your technical deficiencies. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight are these commonalities seen in attacks. This comes from our tech support, who gets calls regularly from people that say, hey, I've been compromised. And some of the things that when we do the investigation, some of the things that we identify why the infection was successful. First and foremost, weak credentials. If you think about the ransomware actors today, they are going after your credentials, your administrator credentials. They're going after your domain controller credentials. More importantly, what they're going after is your security controls administrative account. Because what we have seen regularly is that we'll identify a system that was infected with ransomware. And when we investigate, we find out that the security agent was turned off. How was it turned off? Well, they got access to the administrator credentials, and they were able to then just act like the administrator, go in and turn off these agents. Zero logon was a vulnerability in Microsoft's domain controller, where it gave access to an account. They could actually create an administrator account if they utilized that vulnerability, exploited that vulnerability. So they're going after credentials big time. So definitely you want to think about especially your administrators, your developers, ensuring that the accounts they're using are as secure as possible. Maybe looking at multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication technology that allows that access to that account to be much more secure than just the username password, which they're brute forcing passwords regularly. They're selling RDP access in the underground for RDP accounts that other criminals have stolen, and they're selling on the underground. Outdated and unpatched OS and applications. Regularly the customer will say, well, we're 3 revs back because we haven't had time to update to the latest and greatest version of your product. We also see them not turning on the more advanced detection features. machine learning, artificial intelligence, behavior monitoring, making sure that those are enabled, because that, those are only, these security products are only as good as the latest and greatest version of it, as well as the latest features that are being added that are able to detect some of the newer threats out there. Insecure application development. We're starting to see this for organizations that do DevOps. You need to ensure that you have security built into that development lifecycle. Too much access privilege, again, minimizing the access to data, minimizing access to some of the applications and systems that are available, databases that are available inside the account can help you deal with that. In a couple of cases we saw, again, when they were able to get domain controller access, they were able to open up admin shares on these systems and deploy ransomware remotely to these admin shares on the systems. And then unsecured devices. And this is the one that where when you think about WannaCry, why WannaCry went so far and infected so many systems, a lot of the systems that it infected had embedded OSs. So medical devices, kiosks, up on the billboards that you saw, that all of a sudden we saw popping up with WannaCry ransom requests. And those systems, in a lot of cases, can't implement a security agent. So that's going to be a challenge for you if you have any kind of devices inside your organization where a security agent can't be installed. Then you need to think about, how can I secure maybe the network access to that? And so maybe network IPS or something that, firewalls, et cetera, micro segmentation capabilities, things like that. You want to look at how can you identify. The other thing is just identifying these unsecured devices. So in a lot of cases, we had customers go, well, I didn't even realize that IP address and that device was still available on our network, and they had access to it. So that can be a challenge as well. So with that, I think we'll turn it over to questions.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you everybody for joining. We did have a few questions roll in, and we'll address those quickly. I know we're short on time. The first question we got in was, in regards to weak credentials, how do you ensure your employees are not using weak passwords?
Yeah, I don't know. You want to answer that, or you want me to?
No, I can answer it. You can never really be 100% sure that your employees are using strong passwords, but you can take the necessary steps to enforce strong passwords, such as password policies or security awareness training. For example, the maximum password age policy will determine how long users can keep a password before they're required to change it. So this policy enforces the user to change their passwords regularly.
Yeah, I would only add that password managers, especially for your remote employees, you might want to look at seeing if they could implement a password manager that can, those can actually generate these very strong passwords for each and every account. It can also ensure you don't have the same password for all the different accounts that people have. I think my password manager, I have 66 accounts right now that I have to manage and maintain. And I can't remember any of those. So the password manager it makes it so easy for me to deal with logging into all of these different accounts.
Awesome. Okay, and then the last question we'll do is, are you ever fully protected from ransomware?
Yeah, are you ever fully protected from anything? Unfortunately, the industry no one can really say that you are protected against everything. Even if you were to just, take your machines offline and move them offline and not have any kind of access, you still have people that can bring in USB drives that are infected and turn it in. Think about Stuxnet. That's how Stuxnet got into the nuclear plant. Somebody used a USB drive that was infected and got into that network that was supposedly off limits to everybody. So it is a challenge. Obviously, the best thing you can do is minimize the risk. And the way to minimize that risk is to look at your security architecture, identify a layered defense strategy. And when I talk about layered defense, it's not only is it the different layers of your network. So making sure you have your endpoints covered, making sure your messaging layer is covered, your web layer is covered, your network layer is covered, all your cloud is covered, but also within each of those areas. So like at your endpoint, you want to make sure not just don't rely on AI and machine learning. Make sure even signatures today work. When we look back at our detection of malicious files last year, 80% of them were still detected through signatures. So people who say signatures are dead, well, the reality is signatures still work very effectively if you have them available to you. Um, you know, uh, you can have network scanning at the endpoint as well. You can have web scanning at the endpoint as well. So making sure you enable and deploy a lot of the layered defenses, even at all the different layers inside your network, is going to go well. And then lastly, I would say as I mentioned earlier, visibility is critical today. So looking for your security vendors and working with your security vendors to ensure you have the ability to identify and see visibility across your entire network stack. So when you see something at the endpoint, if you see something also at the web layer, maybe it's coordinated together and you can collaborate together. So looking for that, the XDR, the cross application detection and response is a technology that's becoming more and more prevalent and seeming to be very well utilized and supported out there. Something like that as well, moving to more of a platform view than a single entity, single solution view.
Thank you so much for answering those, John.
You bet.
That's unfortunately all the time we do have for today, but we would like again to thank everyone for joining us. As thought leaders in the IT industry, we are hosting monthly webinars throughout 2021 surrounding trending IT topics. That said, we'd love if you join our next webinar. Your next backup solution is more than just backup on March 24th. We'll reach out with an invite and, of course, a list of our upcoming webinars this year as well. Thank you, everybody, so much again for joining, and we hope everyone has a productive day.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.